Hi everyone, I'm Marieanne, the Artsie Crafter. Welcome to my channel. A while ago I did a video showing you how to turn magazine pages into pretty journal pages. If you didn't catch that video, I'll leave a link to it in the description box below. So today I thought it's time to get serious and bring out the big books. I'm going to show you a few ideas on how to turn all these glossy pages into something beautiful and vintage. And once you see the examples, I hope you'll soon realize that there are so many possibilities for how you can use them in your journals. I used to have a large library of books, but I got rid of most of them when we moved into this house that we live in currently, because there wasn't enough space to have a library. So I had to get rid of most of my books, but I did keep a few of my favorites, and mostly they're non-fiction books, on history and travel, arts and crafts, that kind of thing. Some of the books are a bit dated and I didn't want to throw them out, so I decided to experiment with how to turn them into papers that I wanted to use in my journals, because I particularly don't like glossy papers. Which ones are they? These ones are not too bad, they're a bit matte. I know there's one here full of glossy pages. This one's a bit matte too. It's not going to work with me today. I know this one has glossy pages. All the beautiful, you can see all the glossy pages there, high gloss. And I think this one here has some glossy pages. I've torn this one a bit. I've taken the spine apart, so it's all falling to bits at the moment. But you can see that's got glossy pages as well. So I don't like using glossy pages, particularly in journals, and sorry about that glare. And I also don't really like turning papers, when you do get them out of the books, especially the ones with just the papers. What am I talking about? And I'm not going to find one, am I, what I'm talking about? One with just text on it, I'm trying to say, like this. I don't really like turning them on the side unless I absolutely have to, or for some particular reason. So, and the other thing, what was the other thing I didn't like? I don't know. Anyway, so I had issues, and I didn't like some of the pages. That's right, some of the pages are really thick. So I decided to experiment with these pages, and so I'll show you what I come up with, and I'll move all these out of the way because we don't need to have a look at them anymore. There's just a few of the ones that I have in my stash, and I want to show you the end result first of some of them, and I'm hoping that these will give you some inspiration on how you can find some ideas, particularly if you're wanting to recycle some of your old non-fiction books, or those coffee table books that are a bit outdated, or maybe they got a bit of mold or whatever, which like some of mine were, because I had to put them in storage. But anyway, to get back to the subject at hand, I'm just going to show you what I've done with the book pages. This is one here, and you probably can't pick it up, but this here was a river, and this is the riverbank on either side, and there's a bit of a bush here, and I turned it into this page, and you can see there's a little bit of gloss just where the stencil was. So that's that. This one here is actually a book page out of one of those glossy books that I got rid of the writing on both sides, and I put it in my printer, and I printed out an image that I got from, I think I got this from Pixabay or somewhere. So that's what I do with that, and then that's just some journaling space, and that's a pretty little envelope that will go into this pocket. And then here you can't see much of the paper, but here at the background here is a book page, and it's not glossy anymore. You see that? got a bit of a sheen, but it's not really glossy anymore. So that's just a couple of examples, or 3 examples there, of how I turned these pages into beautiful, pretty papers, or not, I wouldn't say pretty, maybe attractive, but into pages that you can use in your journals, that you don't have to keep the text anymore. So this here is what I've turned into blank pages here, and these are just a selection of them. And here is one where you can still left a little bit of the writing that's showing through, and this one actually had a picture on the back of some kind, and here I've left the text just showing through, so you can see that, and on the back as well. So you can, these are nice thick pages and they're very vintage looking, but I didn't want the writing. I wanted to use the paper without having to put up with the writing on there. So this is what the pages looked like before I got to them. This is what they're like in the book, so you can see that, and they were glossy. Not as high gloss as the pictures, but they're still quite glossy. So that's what those were. This one here is, I liked this, having the day and the calendar there and a few other symbols, and it had a nice border around it. So I tried to preserve that, got rid of the writing that was in the middle, and at the back I got rid of all the writing. And I think it had here, you can see it's a bit darker, I had an image of some kind, picture, and this is an example of what it used to look like. And this here is an example of what the back looked like before I got rid of all the pictures. So it didn't have the green backing, it just had the white backing with the picture, one picture I think in the middle there. So that's what that page used to look like there. This one here, I liked, this was already in the book, nice and vintage looking, but I didn't like what was on the other side. So this is just an example of, this was just a normal photo in the book, and this was not even a glossy page, it was a matte page. And so I just wanted to show you an example of how you can get rid of all the picture here, because this is really nice, and I didn't want this in my journal, and I didn't want to have to cover it up because it's a nice thick page. So I was able, this is just showing you how I totally got rid of the whole image. Here I've got rid of partial image, and here I started to, but here I've untouched this part, so you can see the variations that you can get in this technique. So I'll explain what the technique is. I'll just show you all the examples first, and we'll get on to the next one. This one here is how this was, and I left the middle because you can't read the writing anymore, but sometimes it's nice to have that as a bit of a feature. You could use it as a decorative element when you're putting your pages together, making ephemera or embellishments, tags and journal cards and all that kind of thing. And here you can see a faint impression of, there was a photograph on that page and there's some writing, so I left it there so that I remember what was there to start with, but also gives you an idea what was there, so you don't just take my word for it. You can see there was an image, and I can just keep rubbing over that and it'll totally go, as you see on some of the others. This is what the page used to look like originally, that kind of page, and this is the image that was on the back that was similar to the one that I started taking off here. So that's that. And then this one here is kind of a half success and half fail. It's a much thinner page. It was glossy, as you'll see, and I started rubbing it off on this side. You can see the text, but that text is actually on the other side, and I started doing it, but I tore the page. I I started doing it back down here, and I haven't gone any further because I didn't know whether it was me being a bit rough because I was in a hurry to get these all done so I can bring the video to you today. Didn't want to wait any longer. So I think if you're a bit more careful, perhaps you'll get away and get away with it and get this side done. But as I said, this is a fairly thin paper out of a book that sometimes you don't want to use both sides. You just want an image on this side, or use one side and you'll glue that to either a card or your page or whatever. And I just love the texture of it. It's absolutely lovely to work with. Here's some examples where I've got rid of the images and the text, but I want to show you what was there originally so you get an idea of how far you can go with this technique. So this one here is not much thicker than this one, but it must be just a better quality paper. So all papers aren't created equal. Some books will have better papers than others, just the way the paper's been made. When it was manufactured, different techniques will produce different types of paper. And here on the back, I showing you that you can do this both sides. Even though it's fairly thin, you can get rid of the text and the images on both sides. So that's pretty cool, isn't it, to use? So you'll be able to use this whole page in your journal. So it just gives you an idea of this is what it used to look like, an example of what that page used to look like. It just opens up new possibilities and use up all those books that have been lying around that perhaps you don't want anymore, or you don't like using glossy pages like me. You can convert them and make them useful in your journals. So this is just another idea. This is another book. I think it's a to do with gardening book, because these are all gardening plants. And here is it's a white page, so it works well. The black here, when you're doing this technique, you will get some of the ink will run into the page depending on how glossy the page is, because the glossier the page, the ink tends to sit on top of the paper more so than if it's matte or satin. The matte or satin, the ink will soak into the paper base more, so you'll be left with this. But I quite like that grungy look, and so I'll show you some ideas with that as well. And this is what the page used to look like. So that was a gardening book. So that gives you an example. This one here was it's very thick paper, but it was a matte paper, and I'm just showing here that you can do the same thing. And this one here has some green, you can see that, and I left it there, and some text, and that's what it looked like originally. And this is just to show you that you can do it on both sides. So it's just a matter of experimenting with this technique. And this is what it used to look like. So that's that book. Then the other ideas I had are not getting rid of all the images, so to turn them into kind of like a painterly effect. So here I've gotten rid of the text, but I've kept the image. And with the technique, it gives you that kind of vintage look about it. So you imagine if I had done the rest of this page, and you can use that in your journal. You could turn it into a little booklet, you could make it a background page, or you could cut this image out, all kinds of things. And that's what the back looks like. So I haven't done anything with the back. I haven't tested this one, I don't think, to see if you can get rid of the back or not. I don't think I have. No, I haven't. So I think this is out of the same book. So this is just another idea. Instead of getting rid of the image, I just got rid of the text. And here I've left the impression of the text, but you can't really, so you can still use that as journal space there. And this gives you like a watercolor effect or a painterly effect on your page. And I left this title up there, The Rose Family, because I might want to keep that as something, to add to the channel. This one here had a basically black background, so I was able to get rid of the black, and because the ink stayed, and then I wanted this image, and then I'll show you more examples of this later, but I actually used a stencil. I put the stencil behind and I rubbed over the top using the method I will show you shortly, and that left that impression of the stencil onto there. So that's just another example, and here's what this used to be. Here there was a strip here of those flowers, and you can see it was all black, the rest of it. And here on the back, so this is from the same book. So here I have done the back to show you that you can do the back, get rid of all that text and the image on the back. This is another book here that I show you. It was matte paper. It wasn't highly glossed, it was just a matte paper, and this is because it's matte, it's more porous, so therefore the ink on there will spread around onto the page rather than lift off when you wipe it off. Here I've left the impression of the text, and also there's the picture there. It was it was painted on, it wasn't a photograph, it was just a painted illustration. And then on the back here I've gotten rid of all the text, and there are a few images here. You can see one, I've left one, so you can see that it was a little image in a circle. There was another one over here, and here at the bottom I thought that was kind of cute. And if there we go, the man chasing the cow, wrestling up the cow on there. I thought that would make a lovely image in a journal, as a journal page, so I left that there to demonstrate. This one here is just to show you another way, another page in another book. It was glossy, and I was able to get rid of it, and you can see that there's still some yellow on there, and it's no longer glossy. It's just that side still glossy, and then on the other side all the gloss is totally gone, and it's giving that kind of grungy effect, and it's a lovely texture. And behave yourself. Not you, my camera. So there is just those ideas to get some plain papers and some little some decoration on there with those ones. So that's that lot there. That's so the technique. And you have to excuse me because I put my my sample bit. Oh no, I think I have one here, don't I? To show you how to do the technique. I need a page. Didn't I? I'm sure I left a page out. Silly me. So I'll fast forward through all this in a minute. Yeah, so I'll show you how I did all this technique on this page, but I'll do that later on, and just have a few more to show you. This lot, oh, I got here. This lot here is where I've used the technique on here and got rid of, it wasn't a high sheen at all, and you can see on the back it was just a satin sheen on the page, so I've got rid of that, and I've gone over this image, and then I've used the image to create a background. So then I did some stenciling with some inks, and that's what I've left, and I think that's very pretty there. So that's that. This is another one. It was, the whole page was a photograph. You can see it was a sunset here, and I think there were mountains and just the sky, and I got rid of that and left it an impression of it, and then I used several stencils, or used the one stencil, but up here I used some gold on there because you've got the yellow in the background, and down here I used black ink, but I actually left some of the patches of the background image there because this is where the sunlight touched the foreground of the photo, and so those a different effect. So you can cut all that up and make journal cards or use as a background page, or I'm sure you can get the idea that the possibilities are endless. Well, there's many. Here I wanted to show you where I haven't used the technique. I've just gone and stenciled over the picture. First of all, I did put on a layer of matte varnish, which is this bottle here. It's a Frenchville brand, but any matte varnish you can use, and there, like that. So I put a generous layer of that over there, top of this photo, and then I stenciled over the top of it, and I did the top in the gold and the bottom in the black. I did the bottom in the black and top in the gold, and then I went over the black in the gold. But that has no, I haven't done the technique on here, how to make it painted, like a painted effect. So that's just an example of what it looked like compared to this one here. Very different. You can tell clearly that that's a sunset scene, whereas this one you can't. And this one here is the same. I just put some matte varnish on there and stenciled over the top, and I think you can see through the zebra pattern that they were rocks on a beach, and it was a sunset scene, so that's there. This here is the technique that I used before I did the stencil. So this is here, this is the base, and then I stenciled over the top of this. So using this technique, I don't know whether you can guess what the technique is at this stage, but I will be explaining it very shortly now. I've just got a couple more to show you. So these are the kind of images that I use. One's gloss and one's not so glossy. So and I'll show you how I did this with this one here. So I'll put that aside so I remember where I'm at. So, and then the last group is where I've move everything out of the way. This one here I've done it differently. This one used to be the glossy, and there was a recipe book here, and this is some greenery and some food. I don't know if you can recognize the food. There's bread there, and I don't know what else. So this one here, I've done the technique on that. Then I did a coat of matte varnish over that. No, I didn't. Did the technique, sorry, and then I'll get my stencil. I've got one stencil here. This is not the same stencil. I put the stencil underneath here, and then I used the rubbed over the top using the technique I'm going to show you, and that brought the impression of the stencil through to that image. And then to bring out the colors and the pattern, I put a layer of matte varnish over the top of that. So I'm just explaining it to you now, and I will demonstrate it later on. I just wanted to show you all the samples first. This is another one where I put the matte varnish over the top, used another stencil. Here I haven't matte varnished over the top, I've just left it the way it was originally. And here you'll see that I did put the matte varnish over the top. The difference there. This one you can see where I've done the effect in black, and I did matte varnish at the top one, but I didn't do it at the bottom, so you can see it's still glossy. Here's a few more examples where I've used the matte medium. Sometimes the gloss it does get rid of all the gloss, and sometimes it doesn't. I'm not quite sure why. This one I really love. It's the tree stencil that we made. I showed you how to make a few videos ago. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link in the description box below. You can go and check out how to make these stencils. And that's what I've used on here. I think it looks very pretty. So you can imagine how you can use that in a journal. And this one here, you can see clearly that it was a rock. I think it's one of the part of the Devil's Marbles in the Northern Territory, if you're from Australia. And I've done the stencil over the top and the matte medium over the top of that. And here, they're not all grungy. You can get some pretty tulips effect. And you can see I've done this there's 4 stencils, and I just repeated the stencil down the bottom because I don't have large stencils. And you can see I put the matte medium over the top of that one. And this is the last one where you can see it's glossy. That's that recipe again. And here I've used the matte medium, but this one here I haven't. You can see it's still glossy. So there's just some of the things that you can do with these glossy pages that you have. If you've got heaps of these books sitting in your bookcase, and you know, you're a bit tired of either lugging them around or having them collecting dust in your bookcase, then this is a way to turn them into pretty journal pages, pretty pages to put in your journal. So I'm going to demonstrate this technique quickly, and my secret tool. I don't know, this is having trouble. My secret tool that I'm using is sandpaper. How simple is that? Just a sheet of sandpaper. Now, if you have problems with arthritis or your fingers cramping up, I suggest you getting one of these blocks, sanding blocks, and wrapping this around. I didn't bother. I did start, but I found I was getting a bit too heavy-handed, so I gave that up. And so I just tear off a piece. I buy them in these little rolls here, so they're easy to tear off a strip. And I don't know in other parts of the world, but here in Australia, the grade that the sandpaper comes in different grades, which is different grittiness. So the finer grit starts at about 240 and goes to 120. That's kind of the fine grain. So this one's a 180 and this one's a 120. 120 P120, so that's 120 grit. So I'm sorry if your sandpaper isn't classified that way, graded that way in the grittiness of the sandpaper. But all you have to remember is to use fine. I did use some of this one, which is a P80, and so the lower the number, the coarser the sandpaper is. So 240 is the finest. This one here is 180, as I said, and this one's 120. So this is the roughest of the fine textures, and this is the medium level of the fine textures. So I interchange with these depending on how thick the page is. You can get away with both. So I started off this one, then I'm onto this one, because I think you know, the more grit in there, the less pressure you have to use, the more energy it takes to sand these pages down. So that's just what I use with the sandpaper. And as I said, if you have problems with arthritis, or your fingers cramp up or whatever, one of these sanding blocks, you just got to be careful when you use it, because it's such a big, you can always cut it down, I suppose, because that's cork. But I have used them, but I rather go and use the electric sander. Much better. So all I do is fold a piece in quarters like that. I usually have my finger in the corner there, and that's what I use. That's my tool completely. and I usually start in the middle here, and you can rub gently if you want to. I usually start off, you know, going in circles like this, but you can, you know, you don't have to go in circles. As I said, I usually start in the middle and then work my way out. I find it easier that way, and I'm using, you know, a fair bit of pressure, and it's also handy to, when you've rubbed in one direction, I usually go and rub in one direction and then I'll come back and rub in another direction, because the paper has fibers and the fibers come together in, you know, this kind of pattern. So you want to rub one way and then the other way, like in a cross grain, to make sure you get all that ink out. And I usually do this on a mat. So if you have respiratory problems, I advise that you get a mask on, and we all should still have some masks lying around the place. And also, if you don't like getting dust on your hands, which I don't, but I'm persevering, to wear gloves might be handy. I also have a bowl of water next to me, and I have some wet towels, and also just a rag here that I use the rag, and this sheet, I have this on the sheet while I'm sanding. Then I tip that off underneath so the dust settles, and then I'll come along every now and then and pick up that dust with a wet cloth, so you're not spreading as much dust around as possible, at least the amount of dust around as possible, because it does get everywhere. Because, you know, it's like you're using sanding papers, so you know, with any sanding, if you're sanding plaster in your house or wood, you'll get dust from there. So you just have to be aware of that. And every now and then I'll wash my hands and dry them. And so we just sand. You don't have to do anything, just sand it all off first, and that's all you have to do. And I just turn the sheet around. As I said, I sand in different directions like that. You can see what I'm doing. So don't try and do too big an area at a time. As I said, you go one direction and then the other, and keep getting rid of the dust. And then I have, where's my tissue? Just so that you can see, it doesn't really take that much effort to get rid of all that text. And it's the same process as with the images or the photos on the page. So I'm not doing what I usually do. Turn it around the other direction. So you can see it's with a little bit of effort, you can get your cardio exercise for the day. When I go near the edges, I usually put my fingers apart there and sand in between. My fingers keep the paper flat. And then when I get to the corners, you want to preserve the corners. So I usually go in that direction and then this direction into the corner. That way you're not damaging your corners, and it's getting rid of the shiny, the gloss, I should say. So you just keep working around the page. Getting rid of all that gloss. And then, as I said, you go in different directions. It evens out all that colour. Underneath, go safety first. The red, I find red ink tends to stay longer than the other colours. I'm not sure why. Red ink must be a bit stronger, the colour, than all the other colours. Even black, doesn't is not as hard to get rid of. As you can see, the black ink is quite easy to get rid of. And I've gone this far, so I may as well finish the page off. Now this will work on, as I said, all pages aren't built the same. All papers aren't made the same, I should say. So if you're interested in trying out this technique, if you like the idea of recycling as many of your books as possible that you're not using anymore, then it's just a case of experimentation. See what papers will apply to this technique more than others, I'm sure. And once you get a dirty spot there, just move your sandpaper around, because it's better to start with a fresh side. Once they start getting the the paper and ink stuck in the grit, it doesn't work as well, and you're forced to work harder. We don't want to work harder, do we? We want this to be as easy and quick as possible. So that's pretty much it. And just get rid of all that the ink in the paper, and use your cloth to get rid of it. Sometimes you get more than with some pages than you do others. So, and then I often take a wet one when I finish sanding both sides, if that's what you're going to do. I leave as much of the colour around the borders. You can see it's all that gloss is gone. So once it's finished, I just use tissue to get rid of some of that dust, and then I will gently go around with a wet one and get rid of the rest of the gloss, the dust. And also, you can see it picks up the colour as well. So, and then you can leave the page to dry, and when it's dried, as I showed you before, if I can find them again. This is what you're left with. So you can, so this is the same paper, so you can see what you're left with. And I mean, you can see the writing, because I've just wet the page, and that's the writing on the other side. But when you do both, that's what you're left with, this beautiful vintage looking paper. So that's that process. And then this other one here, I'll show you two ways. I'll just get stencil. It's one I like using, and of course it's going to go here. I like this one. Some stencils work better than others, as you'll see, and just a case of I like something underneath. So you put this on here, and if you want to keep this in place, I just use some paper clips. Stop it moving around, because you don't want it to move when you're stenciling. And just a case of keep still, because this one's a lot lighter, so you don't get to, doesn't stand out as much as if it's on a darker background. So that's the pattern that comes through. That's that way. And then the other way, of course, I'll just get rid of some of that dust. So you might come up with other ideas. You can play around with it, see what, and it comes out differently every time. Every page, every image, it's always different. So you can never predict the outcome particularly. I will just use black because it's easier for you to see on camera. So you can use any color you want. I usually try and pick colors that match here or contrast here, so the background, some of the background will show through. Sometimes I will use 2 different colors. So this one is just a black, and this one's the vintage photo. And I'll get my other brush here. So on the lighter, make sure I don't mix my brushes up. Actually, this is the brown because I put tape around it, and that's the black. On the lighter parts here, I will use the vintage photo, or I don't have any yellow. I've got the gold, but you've seen the gold. So I will rub this over, and I think I must have got this confused at one stage with the black ink, so that's why it's not coming through as well as it should do with the vintage photo. And then don't move. I will come down the bottom here with the black soot, whatever it's called, and blend the 2 together. And there you go. So you cut this panel out, and that's what I did with the tag here. Cut the panel out here, and when this dries, the color shows up a lot more. The color, not this bit here. You'll notice the stencil impression usually pops out a little bit more, and the color becomes more vibrant after you've sandpapered it. So, and you see it's a little bit more vibrant, but of course you're not going to see it because this background here is a little bit lighter. If I moved it down, I would have got it here, but that's the impression you have. So I hope that's given you some inspiration to go off and try these techniques out for yourself. It's I showed you, it doesn't take much effort to produce these effects on these papers, and it gives you so many more possibilities, because then there's so many more papers that you can use in your journal. So you're not just limited to putting up with pages that have text on them. So as I showed you before, you can get all these different effects. These are grungy ones. The other thing I do was, I haven't showed you that bit, but it's not very important. But anyway, the dust that I collect, and I just wash it away in the water. Sometimes I'll collect it in a little dish, the dust, because it has ink in it. The ink isn't as strong as what's in your pads, your ink pads, but I did with the, not that one, this one here. I end up with green ink when I when I was sanding. So I collected that green ink, and then I got a paintbrush, just any old paintbrush, usually flat brush, and I dipped the brush into water, and I wet the bowl of dust, colored dust. I just mixed it up until it's a smooth paste, and I used it like a watercolor, and I just brushed it on around. You can see the effect here. Brushed it on around here. As I said, it's not a very strong color because the pigment's not strong anymore. I don't know what it was like when it was first printed onto the page, but it just gives you that grungy background. So that's another possibility, to use even the dust, the ink. You'll have ink and paper fibers in that dust, and that's just another little effect. You know, it's not really important, but it's, you know, something you might want to try. And that's those. So there's no reason why, you know, if you're like me, you don't like glossy pages and you want to do something more with these, and you don't really like to use photos, particularly in your journals, unless they're photos of family or places you've been, whatnot, then go ahead and go through all these old photos, and you know, you can get some, use some of them really lovely, and you can use them here. I tried to another effect that didn't turn out, but here's one that'd be lovely to do with a stencil. You just scratch the background like this one, and then stencil over the top, and you'd have all those gorgeous colors coming through, but in a vintage effect, not in such a stark looking effect as this one. So they're just some ideas, and I hope you enjoyed watching all this and get some inspiration, as I said before. So before I sign off for today, I just want to let you know that if you haven't heard before, I have opened up a Facebook group where you, as my viewers, can share what you've made if you've been following along with my tutorials. So, you know, if you want to try out these techniques with some simple sandpaper, then, you know, by all means go and do that. Take a photo and then join my Facebook group, and you can share those photos on there. And you know, we'd all love to see what you've done, what it looks like. So that's what the Facebook group is about. And I also doing monthly challenges. So this month, this is what we've done. For this month's challenge, I made this little journal tag, and this is the images that I use. And I offer this for people who join my Facebook group. I offer this as a freebie for them, as an incentive to join my Facebook group, and then they can go ahead and make either a journal tag, a card, or something else with these images, and then post the photos on the Facebook group, so we can all get to see and share our ideas and show off, you know, all our little projects. So so if you'd like to join my Facebook group and you know, or join in the challenges, and also grab yourself a copy of these free images, then I'll leave a link to the Facebook group in the description box below, and when you go and join up, you'll be able to get access to these freebies, this freebie file. So for now, I'll sign off today. Thank you very much for watching today, and if you like what you saw, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button to help me grow my channel, so I can continue bringing you more more journal videos. But for now, I wish everyone a happy crafty day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye everyone.